Bryce Hoye, you may see from time to time on that newscast as well, because he's one of our CBC reporters. But he has a background in biology and a passion for all things wild, including those beautiful birds you're hearing right there, Bryce. Right on cue. Isn't that lovely?
It is lovely. I like to call them burbs.
Burbs?
Burbs.
Why?
Oh, it's just a cute, fun way that the internet has decided to refer to birds.
Burbs.
Burbs.
Burbs. Okay. So now we're hearing burbs on Radio Noon, and that's because we want to hear from you all about birds. 204-780-0893. If you live out of town, the number to call is 1-800-268-5483. Bryce and I were talking in the newsroom last week about birds hitting windows. You know, when I hear that sound, that thud, I just feel sick. How do you feel when you hear it, Bryce?
I feel frustrated and sad, of course. Nobody likes to hear that sound.
Why do birds fly into windows?
Well, it's a pretty intuitive explanation. You know, if you look at a window that is particularly clean, it's reflecting the outdoors right back to the birds. So they're seeing trees and blue sky reflected back at them. So they just they don't have that same sort of depth perception. There are some ways that you can prevent this from happening, which maybe we can get into at some point during the show today.
We have one of those suggestions on the line right now. Shall we check right in? First, give us a sense of how big a problem this is. How many birds are hurt by flying into windows?
It's a huge issue. You know, like birds have a perilous journey. The small, pretty migratory birds that are arriving in waves through Winnipeg right now that a lot of people are seeing, it's a long trek to get from their breeding territory here, and they have a lot of different challenges that are just naturally occurring, like different predators in the wild. But hundreds of millions of birds in Canada alone die because they collide with windows and buildings, including skyscrapers downtown that have those big reflective surfaces, but also homes in residential areas. And so I'm actually eager to hear what this individual on the line has in terms of recommendations.
Donna, thank you for calling Radio Noon.
Yes, hello.
Hi, you've got an idea that might protect birds. What is it?
Well, we've been using this for, 8 or 10 years, and they are, we have always called them parachute cords. And I know we bought them somewhere, ordered them somewhere from Regina, but I don't know where. But you can get them different places. And I noticed, actually, if you go on the iPad, that they seem to be called Acopian bird savers. But they are actually made out of parachute cords. You buy a big amount of them, depending on how many windows you have, I guess, and you measure and you cut them the appropriate lengths. And then you hang them. We have them hung on to another little board. And you put them about 4 inches apart. And so they cover your window.
Is it like a net?
No, just a cord hanging.
And it moves in the breeze?
It does. And so, like, if it gets really windy, they can be kind of a little bit noisy if the wind is from that direction blowing against your window. But we have found these very, very good. Like I said, we've had them 8 or 10 years, and I think in that time that we have only heard like 1 or 2 bird strikes and have not found dead birds that the way you normally do.
What and you would have in the past before these cords?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you bring them in the winter?
No.
No, leave them out there.
Well, I feed birds in the winter, so they're useful then too.
There you go. And how far away from your windows do you keep your bird feeders, Donna?
Various distances.
Okay.
Most of them probably farther away than you should, but that's where I have them set. I don't know, some of them are about 20 feet. Some of them are also quite close because I set some on my deck right outside my window.
Well, first, Donna, thank you so much for calling. I want to check with Bryce. He was nodding his head furiously, as you were saying, and with a big smile on his face when you were talking about these cords. You've heard of these?
I have. They're called Acopian bird savers, but essentially what they are is, as Donna explained, it's sort of like a rope curtain, basically, that you're hanging, as Donna said, about 4 inches apart. It can be bungee cord, I suppose, but they don't have to necessarily be that. If you buy them from some of these sites online, that's maybe what you get. But there are different DIY options out there. If you just search Acopian bird savers, you can even go to their website and they actually show you some DIY things. But basically, as a visual for people, another visual, it does just kind of look like a bunch of ropes or cords hanging in front of your window. They do move in the breeze. They provide a little texture, right? And they interrupt that otherwise clear reflective surface that the birds are more prone to actually mistake as just this vista that they fly into. And they have been shown to really reduce bird window collisions. So Fort White actually put these on a couple of their buildings 4 or 5 years ago. If you actually Google Fort White and Acopian bird savers or, window collision prevention Fort White, you'll see a post and they explain what they did and how it's had a really good impact on minimizing the kinds of fatal bird collisions that we hear about more during this time.
And Fort White Alive, of course, is a place in Winnipeg that celebrates nature and gives local folks a chance to go and learn about things like birds and how to protect them. We have let's see, do we have line 7 ready to go? Let's check on that now. No, that's just, we have a question that just came in about window stickers. Do they work to prevent birds from hitting windows?
They do, but it seems like the tide has shifted more in the last few years towards these Acopian bird saver rope curtain things. And part of that is because these decals, when people get them, they don't get enough, and they're maybe not clustered as tightly together as they ought to be. So if you look online, you can get these. Actually, Fort White used to sell them. I'm not sure if they still do. But basically, the advice now is you really need to deck out your windows with these decals. You can't just do it sparingly. You have to have them 4 inches apart. You have to basically, you can do them in stripes or blocks, but you want to get it to the point where it's covering so much of the surface of your window that it's kind of like obscuring your view from inside. That's when they're most effective. If you have a few up, it might help, but it's not going to eliminate the problem altogether, according to what I've seen online from various different bird advocacy organizations.
What other dangers do birds face in a city?
Yeah, I mean, cats. Cats are a big one, right? Of course, there's many other things that birds face in terms of threats in urban environments, but cats are way up there with buildings. Hundreds of millions of migratory birds killed every year in Canada, in North America, by house cats that are that people leave outside. Now, this isn't to shame anybody because I'm a cat person. I love cats as well, but they do wreak havoc, and there's been lots of science on this that is included scientists rigging cats up with like GoPro cameras almost on their collars to see what it is they're doing during the daytime. And it's quite interesting because they have these little lives outside of what we know. I don't want to call it a bloodlust, but cats are instinctive hunters, though they're domesticated. They're not wild anymore, but they will kill things indiscriminately if they kind of are in the right position to do so.
It's just their nature,
Yeah.
how they were made. We have someone calling in now. Norma, thank you for calling Radio Noon.
Hello?
Hi, Norma. It's Janet Stewart. How are you doing?
Oh, hello. Yes, I was actually just calling about cats before your guest mentioned cats. They are actually, as your guest said, one of the number one killers of birds. And there is actually, I don't know if a lot of pet owners are aware of this, but there is actually a City of Winnipeg bylaw, number 92-2013, that indicates that cats really are not to be allowed to run at large, except if they're on the owner's property or on the property of another person who has consented to the presence of the unleashed cat. Otherwise, cats at all times are supposed to be kept on a leash. So I think a lot of people maybe are not aware of this bylaw or maybe just choose to ignore it, but I personally have neighbors who are very responsible pet owners, and whenever their cats are outside, they're on leashes, and it's just something that people can do to save our birds.
I'm just thinking of the people I know who live in rural settings, and barn cats were always a thing. They would just, cats, again, would run wild. They were not something,
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
Well, I think that still holds true for rural. I think that's a different issue. I think rural cats, that's because, yes, they do serve a good purpose. But this bylaw is really for Winnipeg that I'm referring to.
And you support it?
I certainly do, because, there's nothing worse than seeing dead birds in your yard, and you kind of sometimes know what caused that. So.
Thank you, Norma, for calling in.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
So there's a lot of people out there, though, who say, yes, it's my cat's nature, but my cat loves it so much. My cat loves being outdoors. How do I transition this animal I love and I share my life with to becoming an indoor or on harness animal?
Fair point. And just two things I would say. One is just sort of a gentle, diplomatic pushback. Cats are not wild animals. They do have these bred in the bone hunting instincts, but they are domestic animals like dogs. They are not, your tabby is not a cheetah, in other words. We do sort of see how cats act, and we attribute to them these sort of wild qualities, but they're not quite the same as something that has for eons been raised in the woods. And so there are some different ways you can do this, right? There are people who are purists and say, cats never go outside. Others will say, put your cat on a leash, or come up with a zip line system, right? Those, I've seen those.
Me too, on a clothesline.
Yes, exactly. Or there's these little screws you can get where you screw them into your backyard. And basically, these things just limit the cat's movement and ability to actually attack birds or whatever. There is this other kind of funny, cool thing that was in a doc that Nature of Things host Sarika Suzuki profiled recently. If you look this up, it's on CBC Gem. It's something to akin of Your Pet is an Assassin. That's the name of it. And it's about cats. And there are these things called clown collars that you can put on your cat.
Clown collars?
Clown collars, which I had never heard of. But there's been actual studies of this, effectiveness of this thing. And basically, it's a collar that's frilled and rainbow colored. And basically what it does is it alerts the birds that there's a predator on the prowl, because they see a wider spectrum of color than cats, than humans and small mammals. So they see this thing that's this flashy, colorful thing coming at them, and it tells them to get out of here. You can also put a bell on your cat as well. That'll kind of serve that purpose. But these things, funny as they look and as funny as they sound, have actually been shown to be really effective. So for those folks who just can't bear to bring their cats indoors, in some cases violating municipal bylaws, as we just heard, you could do that. And these things also protect your cats, right? Like, because people in vehicles are going to be more likely to see this cat that's running around looking like a clown than just a cat, running out into the street.
204-780-0893 is the number to call in Winnipeg. 204-780-0893 in Winnipeg, or anywhere where you have a long-distance plan that doesn't cost you money to call Winnipeg. If you would like a toll-free number, it's 1-800-268-5483. Now, Marlon is calling us. Marlon, hi. Thanks for joining us on Radio Noon.
Yes, I had 2 bird strikes on my window wall last night, and I heard them, so I ran out and fetched them. And one of them is orange head, orange back, and a black underbelly, and I don't know what that is. It seems like it should be an oriole, but never seen that much orange on an oriole.
Any thoughts, Bryce?
It sounds like an oriole to me. The only other bird I can think of that might kind of have that pattern would be an American redstart male. They're black and orange, and there's lots of them right now. They're among that sort of wave of brightly colored birds that are passing through urban areas, but all over right now. So it's probably one of those 2, I would guess.
Now, how are the birds? Did they die?
It fits in my whole hand. It takes up the whole hand.
Okay. Did the birds survive the strikes, though, or did it kill them?
No.
Oh, dear.
No. Unfortunately, I ran out fast, but I left him overnight in this little nest I have set up, but it didn't. So that's why I called in this morning when I heard your show.
Yeah. So again, those would be your 2 ideas of what they are. What should people do when they find injured birds, Bryce?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're privileged here, right? In southern Manitoba, we have the Wildlife Haven, and their whole mandate is taking calls from the public and, zeroing in on these animals that have been injured one way or another. So my advice would be to look up the Wildlife Haven, email or call them. I actually did this myself about 2 weeks ago. There was these pileated woodpeckers that had been breeding. I assume they had, because they had this hole sort of in a tree that they had been sitting in a lot. And then overnight, I woke up and the tree wasn't there anymore. It fell over in the night.
Oh, my
in
heavens.
the wind. And of course, I went by with my camera, and at a safe distance, I saw these two woodpeckers that were looking all forlorn and confused and flying by their hole. Let them go. The next day, I walked up, the birds were gone, and there was 3 eggs inside, and 2 of them were cracked, and 1 was whole. And this is just one long story of bird theater, just to say I called Wildlife Haven because I wasn't sure if they would take eggs, and they don't. But they also gave me sort of the silver lining that, those eggs will turn out to be a meal for some other wild critter. But, don't hesitate to give them a call, especially if we're talking about migratory species. There's some limitations on what they will take in. But yeah.
Nave's got on the line. Hi there. It's Janet Stewart. Thanks for calling Radio Noon.
Hi. Before you started talking about birds, a bird hit the window, and what I thought to do was grab a shoebox and bring a towel and let it rest until it's ready to fly away.
Oh, that was very sweet and caring of you.
And it did leave it did leave after it hit the window because it got a little shock and it wanted to rest.
Oh, that's fantastic news, though. Sometimes if you're lucky, the bird's just stunned. Mm-hmm. Correct,
Yeah.
Bryce?
Yeah.
What would you say to any other young birders out there who are thinking about, wanting to help the birds?
Well, I would say that's a great instinct you had to kind of put it aside in a safe, enclosed area. And I'm so happy for you that it took off in the end, because sometimes it's not quite the happy ending that we want for these birds, which, that's sad. That's a sad reality here. So I would say if you're into birds, one of the best things you can do is just go outside and listen. Listen with your ears first. We love seeing these things, but as the leaves on trees start to really blow up in the summer, and there's so much tree cover, you can't see them as well. So go out. It's almost like a little meditation. You go out and you close your eyes somewhere in a green space, and you just listen and you tune into your surroundings. And that's a good place to start. And there's all places online that you can go. There's a website called eBird, which is great. You go there.
To learn what they are?
Exactly, yeah. People will put their observations online, and then you can go see what other people are seeing and maybe even use that to go find the birds yourself.
Mark's on the line for us. Mark, you've got a question about identifying a bird.
Yes, I live in Winnipeg South neighborhood, just off Osborne Village, and I've seen a bunch of yellow little birds flying around. If you could tell me what they are and where they come from.
Those are yellow warblers. I'm going to 110% confidence here because I've seen those. They just kind of started to set up shop in the village in the last few days, and they're yellow. But if you get a good look at them up close, you actually see they have this sort of fiery orange striping on their chest, which so they really stand out. And they're a fairly common warbler species. Some of them will nest in Mexico, that sort of area, in some subtropic zones in the winter, and then they come back here to breed. So they are ones that actually, they're not just passing through like a lot of these birds. These ones, the ones you're seeing in the village probably, some of them are going to set up in some of those big gnarly old trees along the shores of the Assiniboine and set up nests, and they're getting really vocal right now because they're calling for a mate. They're setting up their territory. They're balking at their competitors, saying, get out of here. So that's for sure what you're seeing.
Mark, thanks for calling.
Thank you.
We've got Donna with us now. Hi, Donna. Thanks for calling Radio Noon.
Hi.
You live in Wolseley.
I do. I live in the Wolseley neighborhood in Winnipeg.
What did you want to talk to us about today?
Well, it was a few years ago when the bylaw came in about the cats. And unfortunately, at the time, I did not have a cat of my own. But a lot of the houses in Wolseley ended up with mouse infestations, and mine was one of them. there was no sea lions out there hunting these mice. And they started coming in. I actually posted on Facebook looking for someone who would loan me a cat that was a mouser.
So again, you were talking a moment ago about the circle of life. You were talking about eggs in the nest there, Bryce, that become food for someone else. And so that's the situation with mice and cats.
Yeah, and I was plugging these clown collar things, right, as a sort of deterrent to keep the cats from actually successfully exacting their bloodlust on our feathery friends. But the interesting thing about some of the science that has been done on those is that while it really reduces the number of birds that cats are bringing back to their owner's doorstep, not mice. The mice actually can't see that wide of a color spectrum, so they don't see that collar. So basically, the cats are still as effective at indiscriminately murdering as many mice and voles as they always have.
Bryce Hoye, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to everyone who called in. Gord, we couldn't get to your call. Sorry about that, but glad you've got that protector on your window to protect the windows from being hit by birds and the birds from being hit from going into windows.
Indeed.
Is what I meant to say. Bryce Hoye, thanks very much.
Thanks.